Yeah, they certainly did, and Sean Lee has played probably amongst the two or three best weak side linebackers in the league. We've talked about Greg Hardy and what he's meant for that team on the football field, and they didn't have him obviously in the first encounter. And to be honest, the way things are moving now, who knows? They might not have him Sunday night because obviously the pictures of his incident with his ex-girlfriend came out today, and we all know once video evidence is out there, it tends to change the narrative. You already see it. There's a lot of controversy surrounding the Cowboys now. They're in scandal mode, and it's going to be an issue, and we'll see how it breaks over the next couple of days.
Yeah, let's start with that as well, because you bring Hardy into the mix, and then these pictures are out there. That kind of around 1:30 today, some pictures surfaced of the lady that was involved in the Hardy situation. Is there a possibility that he does not play Sunday night? Would it get to that point?
Well, I don't think there's a possibility from the NFL sense. They've already penalized him, and there's not much they can do from this point forward. And in a court sense, also same thing. The charges were expunged, and as shady as it is, as untoward as it is, he basically paid off his ex-girlfriend to make it go away. That's the reality of the situation. Where it can come in is the public can put so much pressure on the Cowboys that they might just say, this isn't worth it. We can't afford to take this public relations hit. And I think that's a possibility because you saw how things moved so fastly when the Ray Rice video was released. For whatever reason, and I don't agree with this because anyone who read the court transcripts, read the stories, they knew what happened here. The outrage should have been there beforehand. You shouldn't need pictures to fuel it. But nonetheless, for the Cowboys, it's a big issue. And we'll see if, when you think about Adrian Peterson in Minnesota last year, that kind of turned when sponsors started to pull out. So if sponsors start to pull out, who knows what happens?
And you're right. The sponsor thing for Dallas is pretty big. And but Jerry Jones, they've backed him. I mean, they said he's a leader. They talked about possibly a contract extension. Man, I'll tell you, these pictures, though, they don't look good for anybody.
No, and, from Jerry Jones' perspective, just guessing, but he could always say he didn't see the pictures, although from all indications, certainly the NFL did see the pictures, and that leads me to believe the Cowboys had an opportunity to view them if they wanted to. Now, there's the old plausible deniability aspect. They can say, we never saw them, and they're so egregious now they can move in that direction if the pressure gets too much. As I said, I think the linchpin to it all is if local sponsors start to pull out. That's the similar situation that happened, as I mentioned, with Peterson last season. I think if that happens, I don't think Greg Hardy's going to be a Dallas Cowboy very much longer, but we'll see how it shakes out in the next 48 hours.
Well, and the Cowboys, John, are saying they aren't saying whether they saw these photos or not, but one way or another, they're out there. If they don't act on them, what does that say about the franchise? What's that say about the organization?
Well, the organization, and it's interesting. I compare it, if you think back in the day of Lou Holtz and Jimmy Johnson and Notre Dame and Miami and Catholics versus convicts, it's a similar dichotomy here with the Eagles and Cowboys because Chip Kelly constantly preaches culture, culture, culture. The Cowboys are out there not only signing Greg Hardy, but drafting Randy Gregory, in overlooking these issues again and again. They were quick to sign La'el Collins before he was completely exonerated by the police, and rightfully so. It wasn't his fault, but nonetheless, other teams were waiting for it to shake out. The Cowboys weren't worried about it, and it's an interesting look at each front office because they go about their business in diametrically opposed ways.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, was with us here. The league, did they rely on these photos to determine his 10-game suspension initially?
Well, they had, who knows what Roger Goodell. I mean, there's no consistency that's been the issue with the NFL and all the problems in the personal conduct. But yes, they had the pictures. So whether that's a pretty stiff suspension, and remember, from the NFL standpoint, he also essentially missed all of last season. So that was 15 games, and the courts have already decided that is a punishment, even though they were on the commissioner's exempt list. They've set that precedent in the Peterson case that is regarded as a punishment. So from the NFL's perspective, that's 25 games before it got reduced on appeal. So that's pretty significant. I don't think you can look at the NFL and put this on them this particular time. You also have to realize, again, as untoward as it was, from a court standpoint, the charges were dropped. So it would be very difficult to go into any court in this country and say Greg Hardy hasn't been convicted of anything, and you're trying to prevent him from earning a living. So from a business standpoint, you have to realize there's other issues, and I don't think the NFL can be criticized for this particular one.
Well, no, but the Cowboys can be. And if the Cowboys weren't aware of these photos and the evidence against Greg Hardy, is it clear to say that it's because they chose to not look into it any deeper? I mean, they said, well, we looked in deep and we did our due diligence here, and then this comes out. Is this a clear case that Jerry Jones knew what he was doing and chose not to look any deeper?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the only argument they could make is they didn't see the pictures. And if they didn't see the pictures, they willfully didn't want to see the pictures. They certainly had the evidence. We all had the evidence. They knew exactly what happened, and they made their decision. And they're far from being the first team that signed a good football player that's done bad things off the field. So, there's a lot of other teams that have done the same types of thing. But, yeah, if they're going to try to sell the fact that they had no idea how bad this incident was, that's just not going to go over very well.
And John, the Ray Rice video, that kind of changed everything. Originally, it was one thing, and then that video came out, and then it got changed. He ends up getting cut. Do these photos, do they have to be, is the same course of action soon to follow?
I mean, the Cowboys can do whatever they want. They're a private business, and if they think he's hurting their brand, they could certainly cut him today if they would like to. If they decide that he is a leader and he is a good person in their locker room and he is part of their future, they can sign him to an extension after this season. Basically up to Jerry Jones, and he's got to make a decision. And as I said, I think it will all hinge on the fact of how much collateral damage they get locally. It's not going to affect the NFL nationally. That it didn't last year. The TV ratings are too good. No sponsors. They threaten, but they don't leave because there's no other vehicle that can perform the same and give them the same bang for the buck. So I think it's a localized thing, and it's Jerry Jones, and his history says he's not going to care that much. But this, because of the pictures and because of the environment we're in today, certainly it's up things. I don't agree with that because I think people should have been outraged before this. I don't know why they needed the pictures, but nonetheless, that's where we are, and the pressure is going to continue to mount on the Cowboys.
It's John McMullen with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Basically, the pictures that surface a Deadspin. If you haven't seen them, there's, I believe, about 50 photos, John. I mean, there's a lot of pictures here, and they're pretty graphic, and it doesn't look good for Greg Hardy. Nicole Holder is the woman's name. She said Greg Hardy nonchalantly told her he had people that would kill her. We know about the assault rifles that he held up to her. I would have to imagine, if you're saying the Cowboys are their own private business, the NFL is the umbrella over top of that. At some point, they might have to be the person that steps in here and basically corrects this mess. That basically, this gives the league a really bad. I understand what you're saying, that people aren't going to pull out, sponsors aren't going to pull out, but to allow this to go on under your umbrella, it doesn't look good for the league either.
No, it certainly doesn't. I'm not trying to say it does, but they've already done their punishment aspect, and it would be the similar double. But
it was originally 10 games, correct? And then it got arbitrated down to 4.
Yes, it was 10 games this year, and remember, it was essentially 15 games last year. Although on the commissioner's exempt list, the people on the other side argue, okay, he can't play, but he's getting paid. So in essence, it was a paid leave of absence.
Bummer.
And the NFL has argued that that's not a punishment, but the court didn't agree with them. They've already ruled on that and indicated it was a punishment because you're preventing players who want to play from playing. So you can argue the merits of how difficult the punishment was, but the NFL realizes this is a losing case. I mean, you can't go back and suspend the guy yet again for the same thing. It's already been overturned by Barbara Jones. It's already been overturned in Minneapolis in the federal court there. It's just not. They can't do it. I mean, so
well,
NFL,
could they? Okay, they can't re-suspend him, but could they go back to the 10-game suspension and pick that back up?
No, because, again, it's already been ruled. They've already agreed to it, and that would be the same double jeopardy clause, and the same rules would apply. Now, the only thing they can do behind the scenes, they could wink. Roger Goodell could go to Jerry Jones and say, look, this is awful for the league. You got to get rid of this guy.
Well, it seems that the NFL doesn't care about humans or the human element until a financial disaster happens for them, which we know is not going to happen. So people like this will continue to play in their league.
Yeah, and, on one hand, I want to also realize that, people are outraged about Greg Hardy, and rightfully so. Sheldon Richardson is playing. Remember what he did. There's, it's selective outrage, and so people have to look in the mirror. If you're going to play moral majority, you should do it equally across the board. Not because you dislike Jerry Jones or the Dallas Cowboys or Greg Hardy or Adrian Peterson, Ray Rice, whatever example you want to give. Mm-hmm. First of all, we shouldn't need photos to be outraged by this story. It was probably worse, if anything, than the Ray Rice story or the Adrian Peterson story. The assault weapons on the futon, threatening to kill a woman, paying her off on top of that to make her go away. This is salacious stuff, and this was all public knowledge long before these photos came out today.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of says that Roger Goodell and the league, that they're just putting this in the lap of the Cowboys. It's much like the Cowboys releasing Joseph Randle and trying to tell people like that, hey, we have some morals. We cut this Randle guy. Meanwhile, I got Hardy on my roster. It just seems like a complete half-ass effort.
Yeah, and we all know why. I mean, Joseph Randle's a decent football player, but that's all he is. And Greg Hardy is a great football player. And I've talked about it before. He wouldn't have this chance if he wasn't able to rush the passer like he could. If he was the 53rd guy on the roster, believe me, he would never play in the NFL again. The only reason we're in this situation is because he's so good at what he does. And that goes to the winning aspect of the NFL. People want to win so badly, they will do anything to get there.
Well, that team's 2-5. Maybe they should look at themselves in the mirror and have some morals.
I don't disagree with you. Right. And that extends, but that also has got to extend to Randy Greger. It's got to extend to Joseph. It's got to extend to everybody, not just Greg Hardy, and not just because photos are released and the public turns on you. I mean, selective moral, outrage is what it is. It's not real, because if you had moral outrage, you wouldn't have signed him in the first place.
Yeah. John, let's look at the game a little bit. Castle in command. You write at 97.3 ESPN.com. We've asked a lot of different Dallas people during the week. Chuck Cooperstein was on today. We said, who is the public backing Castle or Whedon? He said they want Romo back. It tells you enough about what's happening down there. But which quarterback of the two is better equipped to beat Philadelphia?
I thought you were going to go Kellen Moore on me, but
no, we got that Tuesday. We had between I've had you were there Tuesday. You were there. You can verify this. We had a Cowboy fan ask us why they haven't signed Ray Rice and Randy Moss. Is that an accurate statement?
That is an accurate statement. That is completely accurate. But
that did happen.
As far as Matt Castle, Brandon Whedon, yeah, it's Castle. I mean, there's a lot of experience there. I think 74 NFL starts. Guys won 10 games on two different teams, the Patriots, the Chiefs. He was pretty good in Minnesota last year before he got hurt. He's a better quarterback than Brandon Weeden, but that said, he's not a very good quarterback. They've been competitive. We talked about it. They should have beat the Giants. They were in the game against the Seahawks. They certainly had an opportunity to win it. So they're close. They're a lot closer with Matt Castle than they have been. And this is it. I talked about it. They have to get this win, or I think it's not going to matter when Tony Romo gets back. I think they're going to be buried even in a bad division.
Throughout the week, we've talked to people from Dallas. I want to play you a couple cuts before I ask you the next couple questions. This is Drew Pearson yesterday when I asked him about DeMarco Murray.
And they won't say it. I think they're sitting there with egg on their face, especially after the release this week of Joseph Randle. He was supposed to be the head of the committee. That was the committee to replace DeMarco Murray.
All right, he said they have egg on their face for Murray. They better team. They an 0-5 situation with Murray there.
Probably not. But you know what? Their running game has been okay. It's been better than okay. Certainly above average. I think it's 6th or 7th in the NFL overall, so it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, a lot of that's the problems with the quarterback situation too.
That's true. But as a whole, obviously, what they built their season on last year was the ability to run the football. And there's a big difference between having a guy who runs for 1,845 yards and wins the rushing crown and having a committee, as Drew said, supposedly supposed to be led by Joseph Randle. He's gone. Lance Dunbar's hurt. McFadden, though, has played very, very well. And that offensive line it's as good as advertised, especially in run blocking. If anything, it's gotten better because La'el Collins is now taken over at left guard, and at times he's shown the athleticism and the ability that people thought he was going to be as a first-round pick. So it's a very talented offensive line, and even though they don't have their big-name running back, they're still very dangerous, and that's the strength of their team still.
John McMullen's with us looking at 5 on the Cowboys here. One of them, we just talked about the run game there. And the next one you look at would be we talk about the drops for Philadelphia. What's been the biggest problem with the offense? Whatever number it has been, it's the drops here. But how do they match up with the secondary of the Dallas Cowboys? Is this a game where there should be opportunities in the pass game?
Yeah, it doesn't match up well, but it doesn't match up well against anybody because the Eagles, obviously, that's the problem with their offense is the receivers aren't very good. And it helps a little bit that Orlando Scandrick isn't there. He's their best cover corner. He got hurt in the preseason with a torn ACL. But Byron Jones has stepped up. Rod Marinelli called him the best rookie defensive back. I don't necessarily agree with that, but he's played well. They still have Brandon Carr. Church is back there. So they have some talent in the defensive backfield, but it's not, the Seattle Seahawks by any stretch of the imagination. So this is an opportunity for Nelson Aguilar to get back in the groove. He's got to prove he's got to be the guy to step up in the second half of the season because nobody else, with the exception of Jordan Matthews, he can stop dropping the ball, but he's not going to be that game breaker. He is what he is. He's a slot receiver. He's not going to scare defenses. It would be great if he would be more consistent catching the football, but I don't see a great ceiling there for him. We know what he is. Aguilar can really make a great leap in the second half, and that's the one thing that could help the Eagles' receiving corps.
Said that earlier, John. I think Aguilar's the guy that really needs to pick it up. I think Matthews has more to give than he's given, but Aguilar is the guy that really can turn this into a much more consistent offense if he plays at the level that he flashed. I don't want to say that he left the consistent level because he wasn't consistent, but he flashed the ability to make plays. He is the second half hope, and I know you wrote that over at 97.3 ESPN.com. All right, John, the Eagles and the Cowboys, Sunday Night Football. What's the pick for you?
I think the Eagles will win 23-21. I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be grinded out for each team pretty much moving forward. But I think this Hardy stuff trends towards the Eagles. I think it could be a real issue for the Cowboys getting ready for this game. It's going to cause a lot of controversy. It's going to cause a lot of headaches off the field. So I think even more now you have to say this is a game the Eagles should win and certainly can win.
He's John McMullen. For more on the Eagles and Cowboys, make sure you log on to 973ESPN.com. Go to the top trending bar. McMullen's Eagles coverage. You can get it all in one spot and everything on the Eagles and Cowboys this week. Oh, by the way, let me ask you, Jason Peters, I did read somewhere that he was going to be out. Have they made that official?
No, he's questionable. So that's interesting. Actually, he and D'Amico Ryans are questionable, and we've talked about it in the past. Wednesday and Thursdays are the big practice days for the Eagles. Generally, when you don't practice on those days, you don't play. But if there's two guys who could miss those days and play in the game, it would be veteran players like Peters and D'Amico Ryans. I still don't think it's likely. I think this is more gamesmanship from Chip Kelly to keep it in the Cowboys' heads that maybe Peters and Ryans are going to be out there. I would say it's less than a typical 50-50 that questionable would indicate, but there's at least some hope that one or both can be on the field.
All right, that will be interesting to find out if Jason Peters, in fact, goes. And then we know Kiko Alonso is listed as probable, so it seems like it's a good chance that they will get Kiko back on the field. John McMullen, 23-21, Eagles. Pick the perfect score coming up in 1 hour from now. We're playing for $400. Thanks, John.
Hey, thanks, Mike.